give a presentation and an update. And some of you may have some questions for some new members on the committee, but may have a question or two for our commissioner. Thank you for taking your time to come down on short notice and give us an update of things going on at the department.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I did bring two handouts. I have a one-page highlight sheet that's front and back, and then I have a spreadsheet as well that shows some revenue numbers. I'm happy to try to get an extra copy to anybody who doesn't have that. Wanted to give you all a very brief update on the Department of Revenue over the last fiscal year. As you all know, our primary job is collecting revenue for the state. And on the front page of your highlight sheet, in FY 2025, which ended in June of this past year, June 30th of 2025, at the end of the year, we had collected $11 billion for the state. And of that 11 billion, you all direct us where to send that money. And on the highlight sheet, I just gave you kind of an idea of where we send most of the $11 billion that we collect. This is not all of what we transfer. We have hundreds and hundreds of transfers that we do of the $11 billion, but this gives you kind of the big categories related to those transfers. And so where the money goes is the box that describes that. So out of the $11 billion we collected last year, we sent 7.2 billion of that to the general fund. And so you all talk a lot during the budget process about the general fund. That's your primary budget fund that funds most of the general fund agencies. Of course, y'all also have special funds, and some of that 11 billion that we collected also goes to the special funds. And so that 7.2 is what we collect that goes to the general fund to support the general fund agencies. We collect 94, 95%, maybe 96% in some years of the money that goes to the general fund. And so if you look at the Legislative Budget Office reports from last year, we actually collected as a state about 7.6 billion for the general fund. So there's about 400 million that other agencies collect and send to the general fund. But the part that we collect that goes to the general fund is 7.2 billion. And out of the 11 billion, the other big categories that we have laid out here, of the 11 billion that we collect, y'all send about 618 million to transportation issues. Not all of that goes to MDOT, but a bunch of that goes to MDOT. Y'all also send about 600 million to education. A lot of the education money comes from the sales tax. The Education Enhancement Fund is where a lot of that money comes from. There's a diversion off of the sales tax that goes to education. I always like to point that one out because a lot of times when y'all are spending general funds on education, you don't get credit for the amount of money you put in through the EEF, the Education Enhancement Fund. And those funds are very substantial every year. If you look at the education appropriation bills, it's not just the Department of Education, it's across all of education. If you look at those appropriation bills, there are a lot of things funded through that Education Enhancement Fund. So that's a really big fund that y'all have a stream of money going from the sales tax. Another one that jumps out at when you're looking at the 11 billion that we send around on municipalities, y'all send about 900 million to municipalities, so about 929 million in FY 2025. And I will talk a little bit more about that when we look at the spreadsheet, but y'all have a tremendous amount of money that goes to the locals. And in counties, y'all send $328 million to counties. And so the primary way what we collect is through, we have just a host of taxes that we collect. You know, the big ones are sales tax, individual income tax, corporate income tax, and then also the use tax are really the four biggest ones. And there's a fifth one that's pretty big as well, insurance premium tax. But the spreadsheet that I provided you gives you an idea of historical collections. So the longer spreadsheet gives you historical collections and all of those tax categories from FY 2019 all the way through FY 2025. And then I have a partial year because we're 6 months through FY 2026. So as of December 31st, we had finished the first 6 months of FY 2026. And so I kind of have the year-to-date numbers out on the side. I chose to go back to 2019 because FY 2020 was the year that the pandemic hit. And after the pandemic, things really grew at a tremendous rate. So after FY 2020, things grew really, really fast from FY 2020 all the way really through 23. And we saw some of that in 24 as well. And so I just wanted to give you guys an idea about how our revenue grew. And this is all of what we collect at the top. So the total Department of Revenue, which is about halfway down your page. I don't have the bottom part on my page, but the halfway down your page, you have a total for the Department of Revenue. The amount we collected in FY 2019, excuse me, FY 2019 was 5.7 billion. And so last year we collected 7.2, as I said earlier. So we've just seen tremendous growth since FY 2019. And what I would point out about FY 2025, FY 2025, if you looked at the total collected by the Department of Revenue, we collected a little less in FY 2025 than we did as the Department of Revenue in FY 2024. And that was primarily driven by a decrease in corporate income and franchise tax. And I'll talk about that very briefly in just a second. But I did want to talk a little bit about the sales tax. So the sales tax continues to be our largest mode of collecting tax dollars for the state general fund. And that 2.8 billion that you see in FY 2025, almost 2.9 billion that we collected in FY 2025, keep in mind, that's only what we send to the general fund. And so if you looked at the total sales tax number, which is in our annual report, what you will see is in sales taxes, we collected $4.3 billion last year. But the 4.3, not all of it goes to the general fund. As I told you earlier, y'all divert a lot of that off. So a big chunk of that 4.3 billion goes to education issues. A large chunk of that goes to municipalities because they have the diversion of 18.5% of all the sales that occur within a municipality. And so we divert off quite a bit of money off of the sales tax, but y'all still, that's the largest revenue stream for the state. Individual income tax was continued to be very strong last year, despite the fact that y'all have continued to reduce the rate. And so last year, the rate, as you were withholding and you're paying taxes on those, this year, we were withholding at 4.4%. And so this year's paychecks are being withheld at 4%. So our tax rate this year for the state is 4%. That continues to be strong. And despite the fact that y'all been reducing the income tax, the income tax collections still outpaced last year's collections. Corporate income and franchise tax, there were two things. This year, we collected $735 million in corporate income and franchise tax. Last year, we collected $967 million. And you can see that's a dramatic decrease. And as I said earlier, that was the primary reason we collected a little less this year than we did last year. And a couple of things I can tell you about that. If you look back to FY 2020, for corporate income and franchise tax, we collected $549 million. And if you follow that along to FY 2023, we collected over $1 billion over the next 3 fiscal years. So it grew from 550 million to over $1 billion over a couple of fiscal years. And so that growth is just tremendous. And so when it came down to 967 in FY 24, it's not really surprising given the tremendous growth that you had. But then this past year, when it dropped to 735, it really caused us to take a look at it very closely. And what I can tell you about that primarily, that drop was driven, I think, by a couple of things. I think some of the expenses have been a little higher for some of our businesses. And then also some legislation that was passed by this body also attributed to that number going down. One of the big ones I think that passed maybe last session was bonus depreciation or accelerated depreciation, which allows businesses to take depreciation for tax purposes on the front end of things rather than spreading it out. And so we took a pretty big hit on corporate income tax related to that this year. What I can tell you about FY 2026 so far is that we're on pace closer to FY 24 right now than we are for last year. And so it looks like that has recovered some, but the rest of the year will be really important to see what corporate income tax does. And also y'all are phasing out the franchise tax still. So I think it was 2017 when y'all passed a bill that phased out the franchise tax for over 10 years. And so we're still phasing out $42 million a year on franchise taxes.
What do we have left? Is it 0.5?
Sir?
And we're at 0.25 or 0.5? 0.5 right now?
Dan says 0.5.
Next year it'll be 0.25. So by 28, it'll be 0. Okay.
And in use tax, I wanted to talk about use tax. So if you look at the use tax line on this sheet, and I have some numbers here that y'all don't have on your sheet, in FY 2019, use tax, the general fund received $326 million. That's a substantial amount of money. In FY 2025, use tax for the general fund was $439.9 million. That doesn't sound like much growth, but something that y'all did back in probably 2018 in the special session, you all created some diversions off of use tax. So locals now, counties, municipalities, and some transportation receive a tremendous amount of the use tax. So we actually transfer less to the general fund on use tax than y'all transfer other places. And so in FY 2025, we collected $949 million worth of use tax and only transferred 439 million of that to the general fund. The rest of that went to municipalities, got a large chunk of that, over $140 million. Counties received over $140 million from that. Of course, education gets their EEF money off of the use tax as well. And so y'all are just transferring even though that has been the category that has grown probably the most in the state strongly over the entire period, you all are collecting less of a percentage of that because y'all are diverting more of that now to local governments. And y'all have some restrictions or some guidelines what the local governmental entities are supposed to use that money for. Y'all have tweaked that from year to year to expand some of that, but that money gets transferred twice a year to counties and municipalities by us. Insurance premium tax is another really big one. I won't really talk about that, but it brings in almost $500 million a year. It has been a really strong revenue generator for the state over the last several years. I wanted to, unless there are questions about the revenue part of things, Mr. Chairman.
Real quick on the corporate income tax. I know we've talked about this and you can see a sharp decline from fiscal year 23 to fiscal year 25. But y'all are estimating a pretty good increase for 26. Do we think that a lot of companies that either expensed or is that what you feel like it was the major driver of the lower?
So I believe that we have, be careful how I answer this. The tax return data doesn't line up exactly with the fiscal years because we pay taxes on a calendar year and the fiscal years. And so when you start looking at the data, you have some things that look like anomalies sometimes because of the way the money comes in. My belief is the expensing costs well over $100 million. I say cost. The state didn't bring in $100 million they would have brought in otherwise. It's not a cost. It's the taxpayers' money.
Would it be safe to assume,
but I don't know. I'm sorry.
Would it be safe to assume that's $100 million invested in businesses across the state?
I think it has to be used for that to qualify. And what y'all did is reduce the amount of time you had to spread it out down to lower. And so I do, and I don't know if that will continue. I think if you thought it through will that continue to be that big of a hit every year? I don't know. I don't know that we've had enough years to evaluate it to know whether it'll be $100 million every year or if we'll have a bigger number one year because somebody makes a really big investment on something. I think time will tell as far as the year to year what effect that has.
That's what the general use of that reduced money would be considered to be used for. I mean,
if we went and did it, if we went and did an audit,
expense on.
I think generally it's your larger capital investments is what that would, where you would see the biggest impact on that number. Yes, I believe that's right.
All right, Senator Johnson, you have a question?
Yes, two. Question I had, insurance premium tax is, it is a percentage. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it is a percentage. I'm told it's 3% on the policy. The premiums received, policies covered risk.
Because we've seen insurance premiums increase, that tax has increased.
That's a part of it. Yes, sir.
All right,
I think it's directly related to that. We also, through some of our managed care programs, receive some premium tax through our managed care programs as well.
Okay. And then, yes, on that corporate and franchise tax. So the dips, we see an increase in say 22. Then we see expenses increase for businesses also, I think, as time goes on. So while we see a bump in income before the expenses, now we have a narrowing net income to pay taxes on. But we also have the franchise tax going down 42 million a year. And we also, on the accelerated depreciation, that would be a front end loaded depreciation. So it gets made up for over time. And so you're going to have a bump in the first year and possibly a few little ones, but after that it levels out and it's right back to normal.
I think time will tell, but that probably will be the case. We just don't have a lot of data to say, yes, that's absolutely what will happen. I mean, I guess you could have 5 years of very heavy investment. And so you might have a big hit for 5 years, but because your numbers here, I mean, corporate income tax is so difficult anyway, because of all the different factors that can result in you either having a taxable amount or not. And so it's much more difficult than other areas to predict what exactly might drive those things.
Well, part of the theory behind the accelerated depreciation is that it will incentivize people to go ahead and make purchases that they might otherwise not, which stimulates the economy. So hopefully we see that long-term, we see an increase in tax collections because people have spent more money and invested more, and then as that makes up. So That's the idea. I can't wait to hear if the theory works.
Yes, sir. I'm not going to argue with you about whether or not your theory is right either, but I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah. All right. You can finish your presentation real quick. We got a few questions, from members, but go ahead and.
Okay,
continue.
just to pivot real quick, I wasn't going to talk anymore about the specific revenue items, but if y'all had questions about any of these wonderful numbers we have on these spreadsheets,
Let me ask any members have any questions on the revenue? Senator Filligane for a question.
gaming has been pretty steady across, in my opinion, and we've seen, we saw a dip from 162 in FY 2023. So if you look at 2022, it was 169, 2023, 162, 2024, 155, and it seems like it kind of stabled out on 155.4. We're really on pace with last year, and I don't know that it's falling off this year, but it is down from, after the pandemic, with people having extra cash. I think it was up a little during those years, and it seems to have stabilized a little bit more and not falling quite as much. We haven't done any evaluation of that, but certainly that could be the case. The mobile sports book is not a large number. But 3 or 4 million is what we would bring in on the tax side of things related to mobile sports book, but it's not a substantial amount.
Thank you. Senator Simmons for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a question. I think we passed something last year where DOR is collecting the surcharge for the E911. Where is that?
Oh, there you go. I couldn't see you, Senator Simmons. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
I said, I think we passed something last year where the Department of Revenue is collecting the surcharge for what the county is heavily rely on for their E911 services.
So yes, sir, that's the NG 911 bill. We've been working with the Mississippi Emergency Management Agency on that program. So they have a group that is going to manage the disbursement of those funds, and then we will register the carriers, I think is what you would call those, and collect those fees. So those fees would have just gone into effect in January, and so they haven't even filed returns to send those to us yet.
Okay,
I think the first returns will be due in February 20th. Okay. So in January, they started collecting and they'll file their first returns in February.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions about the revenue? Senator McMahon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Commissioner, thank you for always being so helpful when I call and ask for information and data. You do a great job sharing that. I already know the answer to this, but for the sake of the record and for my colleagues, the sales tax revenue in the state of Mississippi, what % comes from within the municipalities? I have that. I have it.
I don't have the amount memorized. It's in our annual report with the total.
Yeah, it's about 72%. And so I just wanted to share with my colleagues that when we're not giving money to the municipalities, we're returning a portion of the sales tax that's collected within the municipalities. So 72%, roughly 72 to 74%, varies year to year, of the money we collect in sales tax revenue in the state of Mississippi is collected within municipalities. Just wanted to spread that on the record.
And I didn't mean to intimate that y'all were somehow giving that back to them by diverting that back to them. And I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
And, I've heard them talk, if you ever talked with a municipality, a lot of them, their sales tax revenue could be 35, 38, 40% of their budget. And so it's a vital part, just the sales tax part is a vital part of the transfers that y'all send back to them. It really helps support their operations. And so I didn't mean to indicate that y'all were somehow giving them something that they didn't deserve, but it's based on what is generated in their municipality within the corporate limits, and it's transferred back to them as a percentage.
You didn't imply that to me today, but there is a notion that, when we send cities, we're giving them money. No, we're returning the money to them they collected.
Right.
So I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay, I had two, maybe three other items that I wanted to cover very quickly, if that's okay with the chairman. A couple of years ago, you all authorized us to build a new ABC warehouse. We have broken ground on the ABC warehouse, and I brought a couple of pictures. Hopefully, the computer folks can bring up the pictures of the warehouse on the screen. They wouldn't let me operate the clicker. That's the warehouse as it stands currently. We're constructing it. We hope to be finished constructing it by the end of this year, hopefully. When we transition into it we'll have to decide that later on. We wouldn't want to transition into the new warehouse during October, November, December during our busy time. And so we'll be over the next several months trying to decide when it would be the best time to transition into that warehouse. And if you all will recall, y'all authorized us or authorized DFA to build this warehouse, and they're helping us build it because of the condition of our current warehouse. That warehouse continues to be a challenge. We continue to struggle working in that warehouse. And so we're really looking forward and very appreciative to the legislature for giving us the funding to build the warehouse. I think we have a couple other pictures if y'all want to scroll through them quickly. Oh, I can click it here. Last time I did this, I messed it up. Okay. It's just under 300,000 square feet. It will hold basically double the amount of inventory that we can hold right now. It will ship out up to 8 million cases a year. Our current warehouse, in my opinion, really can't ship more than 4 million cases a year. We've done more than 4 million before, but it really is not designed to do that. And so we built a warehouse that's designed to last the state for 20 years, like you all instructed us to in the bill. And we are right now on target and on budget. Hopefully that will remain true in its construction. And so we've done the outside work. They're starting to do the material handling work on the inside. It's a pretty big project, and we couldn't have done it without the Department of Finance and Administration. And then also, last session, you all created a cigarette and electronic nicotine delivery systems directory. So it's 2 directories, and y'all very graciously gave that to us. It gets us off of our normal mission a little bit. It doesn't really involve collecting taxes. It's a regulatory function, which we have regulatory functions with tobacco some already and alcohol some already. And so it's not completely out of our ability to do, but I wanted to let y'all know in October, we published a registry, and that registry basically says if your products are not on this registry, you're not supposed to sell them in Mississippi. And so cigarettes have to be approved through the Department of Revenue. You also laid out the criteria that we use. We go back to things that have been approved through the FDA. And so the criteria is set in statute. We're not deciding what the criteria is. Y'all did apply it to electronic nicotine delivery devices and systems. And so there are some things that are being sold in stores that are not technically meeting the definition. And I know there are a couple of bills to possibly expand that. We're not asking y'all to expand it, but I understand if you all need to pass a bill to expand that. Just know that we have put that bill in place. We didn't ask for any additional pins to do that. We tried to absorb that in our normal pins. We've driven almost 50,000 miles. We spent over 4,000 hours, and we've only done about half, a little bit less than half of the inspections that we have to do. So it's a substantial commitment on our part. And what I hope you all would do is tell your friends on the Appropriations Committee, don't cut our pins, please, because we are using the pins that we have, including some of the vacancies that we have, to try to fill those so that we can do this work. It's substantial work. It takes a lot of time. We've done over 2,600 inspections. Over 2,300 of those entities are compliant. So we have a good compliance rate. But I thought that was
Over the
opposite.
operations off.
Yeah, you talk about them, they show up. We're supposed to do 2 compliance checks a year. And we'd identified like over 6,000 places we need to do a compliance check. So it is a substantial commitment. We're committed to doing it, but please tell your appropriations friends not to cut our pins. And so we would appreciate that greatly if y'all could do that for us. I think that's all I wanted to cover this morning. Happy to answer any other questions, or Ms. Craig or Ms. Rhodes will be happy to come up and answer questions if y'all have questions.
Let me quickly ask the 500-pound gorilla question in the room on ABC. We've had a few calls. I'm sure some members have had a few calls here in the last week or two. What did anything transpire recently that caused a shift in the normal? Because I know a while back we were we were sitting at about 3.5, 4 weeks delivery. It was really far behind, and And I think we had gotten up to about 3 or 4 days. And so now I hear we're maybe possibly about a week and a half out. Is that?
Yeah, it's at least a week and a half right now. So a couple years ago, when you all authorized us to build the warehouse, you also authorized us to contract with an operator. We did that. We contracted with an operator. They've been in a couple of years now. They've done a really good job. They've been a good partner to us. When they came in, they had a pretty big mountain to climb because of the condition. Like you said, it was probably more than 3 weeks at that point. And so they worked through that over time. It took them a little while to get through it. And this past holiday season, I have some stats. I may not have them at my fingertips. We shipped more this year than we did last year, quicker than we did last year. And so the holiday season was real successful from my perspective this year. We had a really good year. And the beginning of this month was going really well. We stopped a couple of weeks ago to do an inventory. We also, at that point, transitioned to a different, we're trying to use their warehouse management system. If y'all will recall, the conveyor system is out of date. The software that runs the conveyor system is out of date. And in that transition coming out of the inventory, we've hit some speed bumps, and it's been a challenge for the last week and a half. And because of that, deliveries have slowed down. And I think part of the reason it's impactful to folks is because we were doing really well. And so you have a sudden change, and we're committed to continuing to work with them to try to eliminate that. I don't have a solution for it right this moment, but we're still working through that and trying to get things ramped back up where it's supposed to be.
Thank you. Any questions? Senator Johnson had a question.
Yep. So going back to that, it has been functioning well despite the dilapidated condition of the warehouse and equipment. And I would assume, since they were able to catch up before, this should be something that in a short period of time, they should be able to get back.
I would hope so. It's an active situation that we're working on, and I can't give you timelines right now. I would hope within a couple of weeks, we can start to see some normalcy. But I can't guarantee you that right this moment. We're committed to making it work. And so,
Well, people have been mostly happy for the last several years, and so great job on what y'all have been doing. And on the nicotine adjacent products, I guess as we look more into that and the bills coming up, would like to get more information on any way we can improve that for the burden that it's on for you.
we're happy to talk about that. And we don't mind. I didn't mean to sound like I was complaining. We told the legislature we would take on this work, and so I'm not complaining. I wouldn't mind taking away the mandatory 2 inspections, because there are going to be some entities that are really good, and there are going to be some that we may need to go see more often. And so right now there's a mandatory 2 inspections that you got to do. And then I think from the legislature's standpoint, there are some things that I'm not sure really what's in them. And there are products. I mean, there are hundreds of thousands of these products. I don't know where they're all manufactured. I don't know what all's in them. You've got these nicotine adjacent products. I'm not real sure what that is. I've read a lot about it. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a doctor. And I think it's something y'all have to look very closely at. Do you really want, we don't have an opinion. I think it's up to you guys and the health people to decide, what do you really want to be available and who do you want it to be available to? But there are products that potentially can contain THC that are being sold. I don't know if it's legal or illegal. There's a lot of gray area, I think, to some people, at least, what is in some of these products. And I think it's something y'all ought to at least look at and have a discussion about. We're not suggesting that you take those out of the stores, but I could certainly see why y'all might have a policy discussion about it. But we're happy to talk about details of the bill and ways that we think that y'all could.
And that product registration, as I understand it, and I am no expert on this, but that if you have the same product, but it's packaged in different sizes, each one of those is a new SKU that has to be registered. If you have different flavors, that's a different SKU. And so, for maybe 3 product lines, you could have 9 to 12 SKUs for each of those. And how many registrations did you end up having?
I think it's 3,600 is what we ended up having. And there are multiple SKUs for every manufacturer. It is a lot. Y'all did impose a fee in the registry. One of them, we set the fee, and one of them, y'all set it. I don't remember if it's a cigarette or the ends, but we set the fee the same amount you set it for the other directory, but it's capped out, I think, at $15,000 a year. And so if you have a bunch of SKUs, you do cap out. So you're not paying a fee for every one of them if you get to the $15,000 mark. But yes, we've treated those as separate things that need to be registered. And I think that's because to make sure that all those things have the right paperwork to go along with them, and to make sure we're keeping them all straight whenever we're registering them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Senator Sparks had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just very briefly, the adjustment to the grocery tax, the reduction that we had last year in the legislation, I've heard from a few municipalities because we were going to adjust to make them whole, and a few municipalities maybe think we've not done that. Have you heard that complaint? And if so, what do we need to do to fix that?
I don't think anybody has made that complaint to me. I can provide you some data. We only started, so y'all reduced the grocery tax from 7% to 5%. So the tax on grocery items, instead of being subject to the regular 7% rate, they're now subject to the 5% rate. If you do the math on it, if you collect an amount of money at 7% and an amount of money at 5%, and you want to send the same amount of diversion, you can do the math on that. And I think the math works. I don't think that varies based on whether you collect $100 or whether you collect $200. I think the math on that works. And so I don't think the math is a problem on the grocery tax diversion. I think the grocery tax diversion is 25.9. So if you, on a normal 7% item, it is 18.5. And if it's a grocery item, it's 25.9. I think the math on that works. If you do the math on two things and do the diversions on it, I think the math works on that. And we can certainly work with you on that and do some calculations to show you. I think we probably have some with us if we want to.
I hadn't had it in my district, but I had a few of my colleagues that have had some of their cities who believed maybe that it wasn't matching up, but obviously that's our intention, that's your intention. And if there's some misunderstanding, we'll clear that up.
And yeah, I'm happy for them to reach out to us and we can talk through it and see if we're missing some, but I don't think we are. I do think the first month, we still had to get people registered. And so if you just look at our data, it dips and then goes back up. And so you have to get people sending it in. But again, if they were collecting it at 7%, and they hadn't gotten their grocery items in the system yet, they should have taken that 7% and sent it to the state. So you're still getting the 7% diversion. So I don't think that had any impact on it either. And so as long as somebody didn't charge it and put it off in a pot somewhere off on the side, everybody should be made whole. Now, that's not to say a municipality's diversions didn't go down a little bit just because of fluctuation in sales for some reason. That happens occasionally too.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any further questions? All right. Thank you very much. for your
Thank you.
explanation. You sound like you dealt with pins and appropriations before, so a little bit of familiarity, so here. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate y'all coming in and providing an update. We'll move to the calendar. First bill on the calendar is Senate Bill 2202. You have the bill in front of you. This is a bill we passed last year. It passed both chambers and was held on a motion at the end of the session, so it did not go to the governor. But this bill was about protecting the workers' right to a secret ballot. The guardrails would ensure that to be eligible for taxpayer incentives from the state or locality, companies must protect the employee's right to a private ballot vote over unionization of the workplace. The National Labor Relations Act provides two options for recognizing a union, either by private ballot vote or by the method of card check. It doesn't mean the state has to subsidize both, and several states have passed this measure, and to my knowledge, there has not been a legal challenge on the measure. It just says that if a company comes in for incentives from the state, that they will make efforts to make it a private vote if they did choose to want to unionize. So that is the explanation of the bill. I'll be happy to yield for any questions. Senator Simmons, for a question?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Did we vote on this last year?
Yes, we did.
Okay, what
It
happened?
passed. They took it up the last day and somebody held it on a motion to reconsider. It passed over there and they held it on a motion
On the House side?
on the House side. Yeah.
So we hoping that happens this year too?
It may happen again. Who knows? All right. No further questions from anyone for a motion?
Title sufficient to pass.
Motion is title sufficient to pass. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Next on the calendar is Senate Bill number 2272. Senator Whaley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 2272 deals with the ag sales tax. Currently, ag sales tax is taxed at a rate of 1.5%. This bill is an effort to get that to 0%, much like several of our other states have done around us. Mississippi is one of only 6 or 7 states that currently charges this ag sales tax. This would, the process on this, the professional farmer or logger would go to the Department of Revenue, receive an affidavit that they would present at the business that they are doing the purchasing from. That business would have this on record, their items that are available, and this would go in conjunction with the bill we passed last year, asking the Department of Revenue to provide a list of items that are available for this. Sales of farm tractors, parts and labor, farm implements used for row crop, also poultry, fish, livestock. Also helping the foresters, the self-propelled or the mounted equipment that they use in their production. Also fence post, wire, things used to hold captive animals on the property. And I believe that is a basic explanation of the bill. And I'd be happy to take any questions.
All right. Are there any questions from the committee? Senator Blackman for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we know how much money we currently take in from this tax?
Yes, sir. The fiscal note that we were provided shows somewhere between 18 or 20 million.
All right, thank you.
Senator Simmons for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is, out of that 18 or 20 million, how much of that money goes to our cities? Do we know?
Yes, sir. The numbers that we have been given, it looks like somewhere around 1.8 million of that is diverted to the municipalities.
And do we know where the remaining of that 18 or 20 million go?
I don't have the numbers in front of me. I have them, but I do not have them here. I can get those numbers to you. Be happy to. The majority of it is general fund.
Okay.
I
And so,
do remember that.
and so, I'm kind of on the fence on this because, of course,
Because your Washington County farmers are going to love this, correct?
yes, and
That's right.
our Washington County farmers, they support me, but I also have a brother who is a mayor, so.
Yeah. Yeah, yes, sir. And that brother of yours that's a mayor is going to love the extra farm income that's going to be spent in his city, right? Thank you.
All right. You did say that, is there like a, and I've had some questions about this. In order for somebody to get this exemption, they have some type of proof from the Department of Revenue that they are a farmer. Just nobody off the street is going to walk in and buy a tractor for the deer camp. This is more for agricultural use.
So the process, Mr. Chairman, the professional farmer or logger is supposed to go to the Department of Revenue. They'll receive an affidavit stating that that is their business. They will present it to the point of sale. So if you own a tractor dealership or a part store, implement shop, whatever the case is on the items that are available for this purchase, you will receive that affidavit. And at that point, you're able to do business. If you are selling to someone who does not present you with that affidavit, I believe you would be liable for the tax.
Do people currently have something to get the 1.5%?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and that's the same thing. Is it like an MPC certificate they would receive, similar to commercial construction? Okay. All right. Thank you for clarifying. Any further questions from the committee? All right, is there a motion? Motion is titled sufficient to pass. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The ayes have it. Next is Senate Bill 2613, Senator Sparks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 2613 addresses a COLA for Tier 5. As many of you know, Tier 5 has become a big discussion item across the state, and there's a lot of misunderstandings, and I think that this helps with some of it in the sense that the legislation says that the legislature shall annually determine if there's an ad hoc COLA. Now, we're 8 years away from having the first potential retiree out of Tier 5, so we're 9 years away from ever having a COLA in Tier 5. And the legislation allows the legislature as Alabama has done for the last 7 to 8 years, to make a determination of a COLA on an ad hoc basis annually, looking at factors like funding, the CPIU and things of that magnitude. But we felt like, and this bill would show once again the Senate taking the position that we're in the process of stabilizing the PERS system. That process started with reform, and that was Tier 5. Now, interestingly enough, this year, there's a lot of PERS bills. Used to not be that way. So a lot of people are helping us in this process, but it's important to kind of try to stay true to what we said, that we would reform, number one. Number two, we would fund. We have funded $1 billion. The Senate passed over a week ago. That is a clean funding bill, 500 million, then 10 million, excuse me, 50 million for 10 years for a total of $1 billion. We've already increased the employer rate, which would generate $186 million a year in ORP reform, as we've discussed. This is specific to Tier 5 for COLA. It will be $5 million a year out of the general fund for 10 years, putting $50 million that will be managed by PERS. They will set up an account. Their investment team will invest it just as they do, PERS monies currently, and this money will grow. And so we are pre-funding a COLA. I don't know of anything more conservative than putting money away today for a future expense. It's the exact opposite of what we did in 99, which was give a 3% COLA and not pay for it. So that negative cash flow is what has put the PERS system in some difficulty. So we're not going to do that. So that's simply what this bill does. It puts $50 million over 10 years that will be invested and continue to grow. And then in the future, and likely, mathematically no sooner than 9 years from now, but many of us may not be here 10, 12 years from now when this is voted, but a legislature would have the opportunity to not only vote for a COLA based on inflation, based on all the factors that go into it, but they would have money that we have set aside. So while I may not be here in 10 to 12 years, Senator Bryan will probably be able to vote on an ad hoc COLA. And he is to a great degree my, champion on this issue, because he talked about on the floor that a COLA, true COLA, is for those who have been retired and inflation has eaten into their fixed revenue and income. So I agree with him wholeheartedly that in 10 to 12 years, when this legislature decides on a COLA, that they should look at those who've been most impacted by inflation. I think Senator Bryan used the word old age COLA, but those things will be able to be taken into account. But this legislature will have put money out there that will help start this COLA. And I think that's a good thing for us to do. I think it's the right thing for us to do. And it continues in the process that we talked about, that we're giving the absolute best retirement plan that we can pay for, and that those benefits are there. So, some of my colleagues, of course, the commissioner actually sits on the PERS board as well, Commissioner Graham, who's just here. And even, some of the members of the PERS board have used the term, there's no COLA in Tier 5. That is patently false. That is contrary to what the legislation says. It says there's an ad hoc COLA. So the next thing they do is say, well, we just don't trust the legislature. Well, I can't fault them for that, but this is putting trust in what the legislature said. So we're putting money in there to do that. And I guess I would, finish to say we're not done. There are more bills coming. That was my commitment to this body when we were in the well, that we wouldn't walk away from this, that we would continue. And, the biggest thing right now on the Tier 5 is the 35 years. And I want to clear something up for this committee. The PERS board did recommend Tier 5, but the recommendation they sent over to us had no term of years. The recommendation would have been that you could start drawing your retirement at 62, reduced, or 65 unreduced. That's the recommendation this body received, and no military service credit. The Senate chose to insert the military service credit, which I support and think was the right thing to do, and we decided to insert a 35-year unreduced work period. That has been so misrepresented as if it was worse. That's actually employee-friendly versus the plan that was endorsed to us. So I know that's the top line number. I know that's what everybody wants to talk about. But the truth is the Senate put that in that made it better. And I regret that that's become seemingly the focus point that we talk about. But I'll end with this and I'll entertain any questions. I don't think I can say it any better than the words in red. For which of you, intending to build a tower, setteth not down first, and counteth the cost, whether you have sufficient to finish it? Lest haply, after he laid the foundation, he's not able to finish it, and all that behold him begin to mock him. Tier 5 is not mocked for failure of a foundation. I wish we could do more. We're going to try to do more, but we count the cost. We've built the foundation, and now we're trying to stand behind what we said to our people. So with that, I will entertain any questions.
Any questions? Senator Blunt for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would an amendment to repeal and replace the current Tier 5 be germane to the bill?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
My question is for the chairman is whether an amendment to repeal and replace the current Tier 5 would be considered germane to the bill.
No, it's much narrower according to council.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In that case, I'll just speak on final passage. I have no questions. I request to be recognized to speak on final passage. I have no
Okay.
questions.
All right, Senator Mann has a question.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Senator Sparks, thank you for your work on this. You and I sat through a committee the other day with the PERS director, and some of the board members were in the room, and there seems to be some misunderstanding in the general public. Tier 5 was recommended by the board. The PERS board sent that recommendation over here to create a Tier 5.
I'll be glad to answer questions, but based on Senator Blunt's question, this bill is not about Tier 5. It's
Right.
about a Tier 5 COLA,
Correct.
which I guess I digress to talk about Tier 5 in the sense of pointing out what the law said about a COLA. And this particular bill is sending $50 million to pre-fund a Tier 5 COLA fund. So I don't want to not answer your question, but I think if I go down the line of talking about Tier 5 again, Senator Blunt's going to want to, I believe he would probably think we're outside the scope of the bill.
But it was the testimony of the director that the PERS board sent recommendations to us to create a Tier 5, not 1 year, but 2 years in a row.
That's correct.
Okay, that for the record, wanted to state that. This is not something the legislature created. It's what the elected PERS board sent us 2 years in a row for recommendations to create a new Tier 5.
I would say this, as far as it relates to this bill, again, there's been a lot of discussion about a COLA, and it's legislatively directed that this body would vote on a COLA. What this bill does is create a COLA fund to put money already in there to grow for a decade or more, that would be sufficient to pay what is determined to be a reasonable COLA by a future legislature.
All right. Any other questions? All right, Senator Blunt, you wanted to speak on the bill?
Thank you. I do have opinions about Tier 5, but I just want to limit my remarks to this bill and what it actually does. This is a general bill. It doesn't appropriate any money. And a general bill cannot obligate any legislature, this legislature or the next 9 legislatures as contemplated in the bill, that any money is going to go into this fund. A general bill that we pass this year is not going to commit next year's legislature, and in 2 years, there'll be a whole new legislature. And so you can't say that you've funded, I believe it's 5 million times 10 years, $50 million into a tier 5 COLA. Certainly, as with the earlier bill we passed for the 500 million, I hope we do that. I supported that. That's something we should do. But until the appropriation is made by the legislature in that particular session, there's no money to it. Secondly, I just believe in a pension, and I believe in a real COLA, and there is no guaranteed COLA in the system right now. And I believe this is just kind of a talking point to cover up the fact that retirees no longer will have a guaranteed COLA. And so I just tried to run some quick numbers about what this bill would do if everything in it actually comes to pass over the next 10 sessions. And if, let's say you put in the $50 million in all this year. I think it contemplates 5 million over a 10-year period. That's $50 million. Right now, there are about 120,000 retirees in the PERS system. If you put $50 million in the bank today and you get a 7% return every year for the next 40 years, you'll have $750 million in 2066. If you have that amount of money, and let's say the number of retirees stays the same, we have in 2066, we have 120,000 tier 5 retired people. And the legislature put $50 million in this new tier 5 account, and it gained 7% a year over 40 years. That retiree is going to have a COLA, a monthly COLA in today's dollars, not $2066, but in today's dollars, that's going to be worth $153. That's what that person is going to have under this bill. In $2066, the average monthly COLA is going to be $153. So don't act like you're doing something with this that will replace an actual pension with a real COLA. That's best case scenario, $50 million, 40 years, 7%, 120,000 people. They get an extra $153 a month. What we need is a real pension system that people can count on. This is just a talking point, and that's all it is to it, and I'm not going to vote for it. Thank you.
I'll respond in the sense of you're welcome not to vote for money for PERS. That's your right. You're elected senator just like I am. Committee votes are not recorded, so it really doesn't matter. But you're absolutely wrong on your math, with all due respect. There are 0 tier 5 employees today. Your math is based on 124,000 tier 1 through 4 retirees who still have the 3% COLA that's compounded, that is about $1 billion, which creates the negative cash flow under the current PERS system. But to be very specific, you really, math matters. And what you will have is incrementally, as we hire after March 1st, you will have employee number 1, and then you'll have 2, and on and so forth. They will not retire. And the reason I said 8 years down the road, you have to have 8 years of service to be vested in the system. So you couldn't even theoretically have a retiree for 8 years. That retiree would also have to meet the age requirements because they would not be unreduced. So you would have to be 62 with 8 years of service. And while I grant you, it is mathematically possible that we would have a retiree or 2 in 8 years. Your math is wrong because you're calculating like it's 124,000 people. What this money will continue to do is grow in year 9 and year 10. And I would expect the legislature, if they wanted to do what we're doing today, which is $50 million, and if you consider that to be gamesmanship, I would simply just disagree with you. It's $50 million of taxpayer money that we're going to be committing, and it will grow in a fashion, and I'll be glad to ask an actuary to run the numbers to see exactly what it will do. But it is based on retirees in the future. you are potentially 30 years away from having anywhere close to the number of retirees you're trying to use for the math. So I would dare say that the money we're putting in today would take care of the next 20 years easily, because there's going to be no COLA for 9 years, because there's no retiree and you got to be retired 1 year plus one. That will be such a small percentage of people that legislature makes a determination, maybe it is a 3% COLA. One of the things about a COLA, that COLA is not Coca-Cola, that's cost of living adjustment. And the reason the 3% is not really a COLA, it's actually a fixed number on a pension plan, is that it's not based on CPIU. Because prior to 1999, the PERS board had the duty to look at the health of the system and inflation and vote from 0% to 5% was their parameters for voting for a COLA. So every year, I'm sure the people that were receiving a true COLA would love to have 5%. I mean, we'd all want 5% if 5% is available. But from 2000 to 2020, the CPIU in the United States was 1.6%. That's what the average was for 20 years. So for 20 years, the state, after the 99 institution of the COLA, gave a 3% increase on pensions, which that's the agreement the legislature made. I always go back and say this: the employees have done nothing but do their job and they're owed. So we're going to pay it. But when you start talking about the deficiencies of money and what a true COLA is, if we had a true COLA, it would have been about 1.6% on average. So we got 1.4% of a $7.4 billion payroll currently that we have paid. And of course, that's why, since the legislature in 1999 did not do this, I wish they'd have put $50 million of 1999 money in for a COLA, but they didn't, because they got the political benefit of gifting a COLA and we got the bill. So today, what we're trying to do is not treat the next generation and the people that will sit in these chairs like we've been treated. So $50 million is a real amount of money. It will cover likely the first 20 years of a legitimate COLA based on CPIU, based on the health of the system. And I agree with Senator Bryan, also targeting the COLA as it should be, because I don't want to misquote him, but I believe his words the other day on the floor, and we've got it recorded, is that 25-year retirement was a mistake. People don't retire at 47. Now, you may start a check, but you're going to keep working. So all of these things are in the past. I had a person, a constituent one day tell me, we don't want to hear about the past anymore. We just want you to fund PERS. Okay. But if you don't know what you did in the past, if you don't sit down before you build the tower and count the costs, you'll crumble. And today, it's $50 million for the foundation. If you don't think that's enough, I understand that. Would I like to do more? Sure, I would. But we will have committed passing this bill and then passing it off the floor this year on paper. And you call it a general bill, and if you want to try to, utilize those things, that's fine. I guess I'm on appropriations as well. I'm trying to drop a bill over there because that deadline hadn't come yet. So I'll marry up my general legislation with appropriations bill if that is what is needed, and I'll check with legal. But this is as real gets. It ain't fairy tale land by promising something and not paying for it. So I take a little bit of umbrance with the fact that this is not legitimately for a COLA for Tier 5, because that's the very name of the act, and it's $50 million. On that, I will yield.
Thank you. And I would also add in Section 2, it does state that on July 1st, 2026, and on every July 1st thereafter through and including July 1st, 2035, the state treasurer, in conjunction with state fiscal officers, shall transfer the sum of $5 million from the state general fund to the PERS Tier 5 COLA account created in Section 1 of this act. So it does transfer money into a fund. Are there any further questions on the bill? Senator Blackman for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I'm just trying to get clarity now. So is there not an appropriation bill that would be needed to direct these funds?
No.
Thank you.
We'll get a clarification. Hang on one second. The answer from Elbow is there is not a need for appropriation bills. This transfers the bill to the fund and PERS would use that at the time they need to do a COLA. They would have the funds in the account to pay the COLA.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Brumfield for a question.
For a question, Mr. Chairman.
All right, you're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Sparks Chairman Sparks for your hard work and efforts. When you received those numbers, from tiers, our projected numbers over those years, would you share that? I would love to know. Senator Blunt numbers you said, seem to be inaccurate. I would love to have more of an accurate number that we can look at so that I can share with my constituents. This is what we're doing.
I'll be glad to, and I will say this, two things on that note. PERS does a really good job of putting information on their website. I mean, and I'm not going to direct you to their website. I will try to get you that specific information, but they are very, very good about sharing graphs, charts, dollars, cents, growth projections. And but I will ask them, and I have asked the actuaries to give us a specific on this. And the only reason I say that those numbers are not correct when somebody comes up with $153 is that you can't assume today's retiree population for Tier 5 because Tier 5 has yet to begin. But I'll be glad to do that.
Okay, I was just thinking with this being new appropriation, it hadn't been presented yet or updated, but I'll
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions? Thank you, Senator. Seeing no further questions for a motion.
Title sufficient, do pass.
Motion is title sufficient, do pass. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. The ayes have it. That concludes today's agenda. Motion to rise and report. All those in favor say aye. All opposed? The ayes have it.